So we remember that when Sri Aurobindo was in jail, he went through a period of intense torment to begin with, and he kept asking God that, why have you brought me to this? I was here to do your work, to set the country free. Why have you put me through all this? And he went through all kinds of inner turmoils till suddenly an inner vision opened up and he saw Krishna everywhere. He saw Krishna in the jailers and the blankets and the prisoners and in everything. And the same prison which was so oppressive to him before, after this inner vision opened up, it became the most blissful place for him. So many of us have our own prisons we are stuck in, whether it's a home environment, whether it's a prison of a psychodrama, whatever, we are stuck in it and we suffer from it till an inner vision opens up. And that inner vision can be the psychic vision, the vision of the psychic Agni. And Mother often talks about lighting a psychic fire because the element associated with the psychic is Agni or fire. And it's interesting that in the Sankhya philosophy, each sense organ is associated with a particular element. Yeah, so like space is ears and touch is air, fire is vision. So it's interesting that the element of the psychic is Agni or fire, and we talk about psychic vision, seeing things in a completely different way. And for the psychic to step forward and for us to have this different kind of vision, there is a process which Mother says is lighting the psychic fire. The psychic fire is always there, but there's a process to light it. And in the Vedic symbology, there's a very beautiful symbol given. It's said that you take a square cup and suppose it's put in a hole in earth, and another square cup is fitted into it, and between the two square cups there are dry twigs, and the sage will put a rod through the two cups and churn it. So churn it really fast so that the twigs between the cups catch fire. So the lower cup represents the body, the external being, the upper cup the spirit. It's the psychic fire which joins the matter to the spirit. We did this last time, no? Mother says the psychic being is like the generator of electricity and the body is like the lamp. It's what brings light to the body. So this whole talk today is about lighting the psychic fire. Last time we kept saying that our road to happiness and salvation is to bring the psychic forward. And you had asked that, how do we bring the psychic forward? And that's the whole process that Mother calls lighting the psychic fire, and we'll read what she says about it. Somebody asked Mother how to light it, how to light the psychic fire. Mother says, by aspiration, by the will for progress, by the urge towards perfection. Above all, it is the will for progress and self-purification which lights the fire. The will for progress and self-purification. And self-purification is an acute study of yourself. So when things go wrong, if I am unconscious and I haven't purified myself enough, I get caught into the blame game. I start blaming people, I start saying this is not fair, I'm hurt, you shouldn't have done this, etc., etc. But the process of self-purification is about realizing that beautiful line from Savitri, our outward happenings have their seed within. So what is it in me that invited this? And I can trace it down. If anything goes amiss outside and I put aside the blame game and I sit with myself and I retrace the flow of events, I'll see what it was in me that triggered this thing outside. Have you all noticed that? If you look very carefully, you'll always find there was some unconscious movement in you which invited that behavior from the person you got into a bad interaction with or whatever. If you were in the right consciousness, it wouldn't have happened. We keep coming back to what the Mother says, whenever there's a quarrel, both parties involved have to be wrong. So self-purification is about really looking at yourself not with self-hatred and not with the feeling of, I'm so stupid, I always go wrong. That's not self-purification. It's about having a viveka, discrimination, to really see what is it in me, what was the seed in me that invited that outward happening. So that is part of lighting the psychic fire. Brutal honesty with yourself, but without criticism, without self-judgment, just seeing it. Yeah, this was it in me, but I'm not judging it as good or bad. I'm just seeing this is the unconscious pocket in me and I'm putting a will to change it. That's all, without guilt, without negativity towards myself. So Mother says two things for self-purification to light the psychic fire. One is self-purification and two is the will to progress. So I'm seeing this defect in me and I'm finding a will to progress. I'm finding a will to say that next time, let me be more conscious. Next time, this thing in me which invited this beating from life, let that thing itself change.
Sometimes I may not done anything also.
But Subhana, it's never like that. I mean,
it comes to you even if you are absolutely like we're not playing out of anything, not a wrong consciousness, not anything,
but Subhana, look, there'll always be something, because if it's not, then we are saying the law of cause and effect isn't true. And we are saying that Sri Aurobindo's line in Savitri that our outward happenings have their seed within isn't true, which can't be. I'm not seeing it, and I have to develop quite a level of consciousness to be able to pick it up, because it's very subtle. But I can do it with prolonged practice. If I keep looking, first of all, if I stop blaming the outside, then I have space to look at my inside and change it. But if I keep blaming the outside, then I don't have the space or the awareness left to look into me.
I think it's true without fail.
It's true without fail, always. So, those who have a strong will, when they turn it towards spiritual progress and purification, automatically light the fire within themselves. And each defect one wants to cure, or each progress one wants to, if all that is thrown into the fire, it burns with a new intensity. And this is not an image, it is a fact in the subtle physical. One can feel the warmth of the flame. One can see in the subtle physical the light of the flame. So Mother is saying, in people whose psychic fire is well lit, if people had vision, in the subtle physical they would actually see this fire lit. And when there is something in the nature which prevents one from advancing, one throws it into this fire. It begins to burn and the flame becomes more intense. So every time it's like the fuel for this psychic fire are our impurities. Every time we throw our impurities into the psychic fire, it burns brighter. What does it mean to throw our impurities? Firstly, to be aware of them. That itself is a first step, and it requires a lot of sincerity. It's so much easier to blame the outside. It's so much easier to hold another person responsible for the hurt you felt. But it requires a lot of consciousness to step back and find in yourself that pocket of consciousness that invited this. And then put all your will and offer it to the Mother in your heart. And every time you do this, the psychic fire burns brighter, the Mother says.
Just share. I found asking the question, what have I to learn from this, works really well, especially in the beginning.
Yes. When things go wrong, instead of, your mind will go, if you had a negative interaction with a person, your mind will keep going into that. It's almost like a force beyond you, which will keep pulling you into thinking of how bad the person is, how the person's done you wrong, how wrong it was, how you feel let down. And you need a lot of consciousness to cut cord with that pull and say, that's not my business, and that won't be entirely true anyways. Because see, when you judge your interaction with a person, it's always like taking a piece of the jigsaw puzzle, looking at the blur of colors without knowing the whole context where it fits in, and you're judging. So your judgment, however right it seems to you, somewhere it's always going to be incomplete and false. Beautifully said that unless you know everything about a being since the beginning of time, every judgment you make about the person will necessarily be incomplete and inaccurate. So first, suspend judgment. That itself takes a lot of consciousness, because your mind is fallen into such an unconscious mode. It will judge and judge and judge and keep making yourself more unhappy, keep fault finding, keep blaming. But first thing, tell yourself, however right this judgment about the person seems to me, from another context it has to be wrong or incomplete or inaccurate. Because it's been so beautifully said by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow that if you were to know the secret history of your worst enemy, the whole history of his whole past, you'd have enough compassion to disarm all hostility. You don't know, that's why you're judging, but you don't know what the person has carried to the moment, what forces have pulled the person to be that way with you. So if the person's being particularly toxic, I'm not saying we have to be a doormat. You stand up for yourself, you protect yourself, put your energies into that protection. But try not to judge the person. Can you do that? Is that easy? Can you do that? Yes? To protect yourself, to be available to yourself, and yet not get pulled into judging the person. You feel you're available to yourself when you judge the person. It's like, no, it's like if Trupti and I have a fight and Shailaja is my friend, I feel Shailaja loves me if she takes my side. Whether I'm in the right or wrong, if Shailaja has my back, she has to take my side. So when in my head I'm making that other person wrong, I'm taking my own side. You know what I mean? But that's stupid. In fact, you're in another way not taking your own side, because you're pushing yourself more into unhappiness and unconsciousness.
Isn't a way of protecting yourself, like suppose if you're judging the person, you're protecting yourself, not from a toxic person?
No, you're seeing, there are no toxic people, there's toxic behavior. Because every moment of that person's life, the person couldn't have been toxic. In that interaction with you, there was toxic behavior. And yes, I'm going to protect myself from the toxic behavior by maybe stepping back or calmly stating facts to the person without judgment. That person will accept what you're saying much more if you present ABC facts, you did this, you did this, you did this, without bringing that emotional baggage of you hurt me, you made me feel like this, you did this, you did, then the person becomes in a way more toxic. So you speak up for yourself from the truth, but don't indulge that pattern of behavior that wants to keep judging the person and making the person wrong and, you know, justifying your angst against the person. Are you getting what I'm saying? Now that naturally starts happening when your psychic starts coming forward, because as I said earlier, psychic is fire and fire is vision. So your inner vision starts opening up beyond what your outer vision sees. And even on the heels of judgment, something will stop you. Stop. Your judgment may not be true. Something will keep, some truth will keep subtly guiding you, the more you carve your inroads inwards.
The moment you see, you know, you said something or you felt it, not even said it, then it showed you.
Yeah, there'll
You
be,
may not be able to act on it at that moment, but
you see it. And the next step is to try and act on it. So, meditation. The mother says the number of hours spent in meditation is no proof of spiritual progress. It is a proof of your progress when you no longer have to make an effort to meditate. Then you have rather to make an effort to stop meditating. It becomes difficult to stop meditating, difficult to stop thinking of the divine, difficult to come down to ordinary consciousness. Then you are sure of progress. So beautiful, no? Mother saying to light the psychic fire, it's not the number of hours you spend in meditation, but when you have to make an effort to stop meditating. And in their yoga, meditation is not just quietening the mind. Meditation is a mind which is constantly turned towards God. Like in Gita, there's that shloka, man mana bhava mad bhakto, become me-minded. So that state of being where I'm constantly thinking of the divine, that is a meditative state. So mother says, instead of the number of hours in progress, how much you're constantly thinking of the divine is your measure of progress. I share with you, I had a girl who used to come to Savitri classes years ago. She was barely 18 and she was going through a very bad patch at college, and suddenly coming here, She came to Sri Aurobindo in a big way, and she was so hooked to him that she told me, I don't know what's happening. Out of 10 thoughts, 8 thoughts are about Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And I thought, wow, at 18 to have that grace. So that's a sign of progress. She may not be sitting quietly and meditating at all. Whereas for most of us, we are lucky. Out of 10 thoughts, if one thought also on an average is about them throughout the day, because it just isn't till we make it otherwise. Then you have made real progress when concentration in the divine is the necessity of your life, when you cannot do without it, when it continues naturally from morning to night, whatever you may be engaged in doing, whether you sit down to meditation or go about and do things in work, what is required of you is consciousness. That is the one need, to be constantly conscious of the divine. Now, it begins with remembrance of the divine, but remembrance isn't everything. Remembrance progresses to consciousness of the divine, to really look at this whole universe as an extended body of the divine. To remember when you're interacting with anyone that you're interacting with the divine. How would you treat them? Whether it's your staff, whether it's that person who rubbed you off the wrong way. The constant remembrance that this is also Mother, this is also the light, this is also the divine. When I'm doing any work, to do it as an offering to the divine. When constantly I can't stop thinking of the divine, that is the meditative state the Mother wants us to be in. So for that, it may be necessary to put aside a daily time where you strengthen your aspiration. It could just be 10-12 minutes, but you really connect with the Mother and you put an aspiration that, Mother, throughout the day, let me remember you. Let me see you in everything and let me love you. So there was a poem, very beautifully, the poet is talking about a hard time she's going through, and it ends with, through every moment of whatever I have to go through, give me this much grace, let me love you. Because if I love you, I'm sorted. Whatever you take me through, if I'm, when we are in Pandi, Samadhi, whatever, we have that feeling of love. Whatever happens outside, we are good. So that is all we need. We don't need circumstances to fall into place. We need that inner connection which takes us through everything. Sri Aurobindo's words, the practice of this yoga demands a constant inward remembrance of the one central liberating knowledge. So Sri Aurobindo says that the practice of his integral yoga involves a constant, look at his word, constant, not that I remember it 2 minutes and forget, inward remembrance of one central principle. What is it? In all is the one self. The one divine is all. All are in the divine. All are the divine. So in all is the one self, in the floor, in the air, everything is vibrating with that one divine. The one divine has become all. So as the Upanishads say, everything is the Vishwarupa of that one light, the universal form of that one light. And all are the divine. All are the divine, and there is nothing else in the universe. This thought or this faith is the whole background until it becomes the whole substance of the consciousness of the worker. Now, if we could really live this, that everything is the divine is everything, the divine is in everything, what would be the difference in the way we interact with people?
All the judgment drops, toxicity drops. Like,
Why would judgment drop?
because like you see the divine in that person, so then you come from that aspect of love.
Yes, you say that mother in this person is making the person behave like that. I don't know why, but at least let me suspend judgment. Even if you don't love, at least you'll be able to halt that tiring wheel and cycle of judgment. And if you
I don't think so. See, if you're saying you come to this point, then there'll be only love.
no, but if we haven't come to this point, then at least judgment will stop. Then it can progress to love. And if we see someone really suffering, that's a big one for us, no? We see people suffering and we shrink. And seeing human suffering makes us question God and grace at a very superficial level. But there also, if I remember that I'm seeing only this form suffer, but it's actually mother in that form who has chosen this experience of suffering. And the mother in that form knows how to look after herself. It's not my responsibility to completely heal this person or take away the person's pain, but I'll do what I can as an offering to the mother in her. Beyond that, it's the mother in her who will look after her, right? And we see this so beautifully exemplified in Mother Teresa. We know that she used to go into the streets of Calcutta and clean the wounds of lepers, wounds into which rats would have eaten. I mean, it was a very pathetic state. And day after day, her life was to go into the streets, clean the lepers, clean the sick people, bring them into a home so that even if they were to die, they would have a dignified death. That was her work. To us, it seems like a nightmare, but it was the joy of her life. And somebody asked her once, Mother, how do you do this day after day? How do you touch these lepers and clean them and they are smelling and all that? And she said, you know, you're only seeing a dirty, diseased leper. I am seeing my Christ on the cross and I'm nursing him. So that changes the whole equation. If you are nursing Christ, then firstly you don't feel sorry because you know that he is all powerful. He has chosen this experience for himself for whatever reason, and you're doing it as a gift to that person. And that's one thing I'm increasingly realizing, that when we get pulled down into unhappiness, when we see unhappy people, we don't help them at all. Because how do we help them if we are sinking with them, no? You can pull a person up if your hand is higher, but if that person's sinking hand is making you sink with them, how can you help them? So if you really remember that that person is also the divine, and you do for the person like you do for mother, mother has said, no, that if you come from the highest towards any person, however pathetic the person's situation is, the highest in that person is obliged to come forward. So if you interact with anyone, the unhappy, the happy, the wild, the beautiful, all with this drishti of you are also God, you are also God, that is your biggest ticket to happiness and your greatest openness to freedom. But we keep forgetting that.
Anahita,
Yeah?
I don't have a problem with people who are suffering. I sympathize with them, I feel empathy. So that's not an issue. I have an issue with people who inflict suffering. Terrorists, for example. So I don't judge the terrorist, but at the same time, I don't feel one with him. I don't feel any
You don't have to feel one with him.
compassion for the terrorist.
I'm not asking you to have compassion for the terrorist. I don't think Mother and Sri Aurobindo had compassion for Hitler. They fought him on the occult plains tooth and nail and finally were victorious. We are not talking, It's a misplaced compassion to have compassion for the terrorist. But if the terrorist infects you with the virus, see, the terrorist is a terrorist because his conditioning has infused rage and anger and wanting retribution into him. If looking at him you get infected by the same consciousness, the asura just grows. Every time you get angry at the asura grows.
No, I don't get angry at I don't feel any judgment,
Yeah.
anger, no negativity.
So what's your question?
Yeah, but I don't feel anything positive.
I'm not saying feel positive towards.
After all, the terrorist is also divine, right?
So it is, but
So
his
then we
action.
should be feeling love for everyone. Like
Not
everyone
love, but we haven't reached that point where we can feel love properly even for people who love us, let's be frank. So forget about terrorists, but for a sage who is over there, he will be in a state of prayer even for the terrorist. May you heal, may you come out of your ignorance. But if we haven't reached there, at least let's not judge. That's all I'm saying. Because we also don't know what makes a terrorist a terrorist. There's a whole history to it. So in the absence of knowing, don't judge. So a memory, a self-dynamizing meditation of this kind, Sri Aurobindo says, must and does in its end turn into a profound and uninterrupted vision and a vivid and all-embracing consciousness of that which we so powerfully remember or on which we so constantly meditate. So this was the passage, and a sadhak asks the mother, sweet mother, what does Sri Aurobindo mean by a self-dynamizing meditation? Mother replies, it is a meditation that has the power of transforming your being. It is a meditation which makes you progress as opposed to static meditation, which is immobile and relatively inert, and which changes nothing in your consciousness or in your way of being. A dynamic meditation is meditation of transformation. Generally, people don't have a dynamic meditation. When they enter into meditation, or at least what they call meditation, they enter into a kind of immobility when nothing stirs, and they come out of it exactly as they went in, without any change either in their being or in their consciousness. And the more motionless it is, the happier they are. They could meditate in this way for eternities. It would never change anything either in the universe or in themselves. That is why Sri Aurobindo speaks of a dynamic meditation, which is exactly the opposite. It is a transforming meditation. So she's saying those meditations where you just quieten your mind and feel peaceful, you will feel good for the moment, but when you come out of it, it's not really going to change your nature. So it's not a dynamic meditation. So mother asks, somebody asks mother, how is it done? Is it done in a different way? Mother replies, I think it is the aspiration that should be different. The attitude should be different. Different way? What do you mean by way? The way of sitting? Not that. The inner way? Yes. But for each one it is different. I think the most important thing is to know why one meditates. This is what gives the quality of the meditation and makes it of one order or another. That's why at the beginning of all our yoga classes, I always ask you to articulate your aspiration, right? Because before you do any practice, it's good to have your goal in mind. Before you meditate, what do I want out of this? What do I want shifted in me? So, you may meditate upon yourself to the divine force. You may meditate to reject the ordinary consciousness. So you may meditate to open yourself to the divine force in the heart or overhead. You may meditate to reject the ordinary consciousness. Suppose you're caught in a very ordinary consciousness which is pulling you down. You sit with the full aspiration that, Mother, I'm sitting. We are going to partner together so that I'm rid of this. I'm free of this. That could be one aspiration. You may meditate to enter the depths of your being. You may meditate to learn how to give yourself integrally. I want to give myself to you. Through the meditation, show me how I can do it. You may meditate for all kinds of things. You may meditate to enter into peace and calm and silence. This is what people generally do, but without much success. But you may also meditate to receive the force of transformation, to discover the points to be transformed, to trace out the line of progress. And then you may also meditate for very practical reasons. When you have a difficulty to clear up, a solution to find, when you want help in some action or other, you may meditate for that too. I think everyone has his own mode of meditation, but if one wants the meditation to be dynamic, one must have an aspiration for progress, and the meditation must be done to help and fulfill this aspiration for progress. Then it becomes dynamic. So a meditation without aspiration is not a dynamic meditation, according to Mother. So now, lines from Savitri. We'll start from, the voice replied, remember why thou camest, find out thy soul, recover thy hid self, in silence seek God's meaning in thy depths, then mortal nature change to the divine. So beautiful. Again, it's about changing his whole yoga is about changing our nature. So I said this last class also, I'll say it again. In his yoga, the parameter for spiritual progress is not our capacities to see visions, to have experiences. Their parameter is how differently are you interacting with people in life. How different is the flow of your thoughts and emotions. If that changes, only then, in Mother's parlance, are you really progressing. So, find out thy soul, recover thy hid self, in silence seek God's meaning in thy depths. What is God's meaning in my depth? To bring me to the truth, right? To bring me to the truth that Sri Aurobindo saw in jail, that Mirabai saw towards the end of her life. We know her story, right? That when she left and for 2 years in Vrindavan, Krishna had told her, leave the palace and go to Vrindavan. She walked on foot, and she was called the beggar princess because her clothes tore, she wouldn't have food to eat, and she looked very noble. She was a princess, so many people would comment, oh, she seems to be from a royal family, but she must have done something very bad that she's been thrown out. And they'd say all kinds of things to her. And earlier Krishna would come and play with her all the time, but for all the 2 years that she was on foot in Vrindavan, on her way to Vrindavan, he didn't come to her once. When she was most lost, he didn't come to her once. And the final straw was she'd left taking the Krishna idol, which she was given as a child and which the whole story began. And 2 robbers stole that also. So then she just said that, Krishna, I don't know, you haven't come to me, you can't be wrong. But there must be something wrong with me and I don't see the point in living. and she was about to jump into the river and kill herself, and her tear fell to the floor. And the moment it touched grass, suddenly she saw Krishna in her teardrop. And then she saw Krishna in the grass blade. And then she suddenly saw Krishna everywhere. And then the story, of course, says he swept her into her arms. And he's supposed to have told her that you have seen the deep, you have seen the drop in the deep, but I had to show you the deep in the drop. In a drop, you can see Krishna. You saw Krishna in my idol. But I had to take you through all these experiences to make your consciousness ready to see the real Krishna beyond the idol also. And Mirabai was one of the absolute beloveds of Krishna. And yet he took her through this whole experience just to give her this. So that is seeking God's meaning in your depths. Mirabai had to go through all this. We each have to go through whatever our path is, maybe through joy, through pain, whatever. Of course, when we come to Mother and the sunlit path, it need not be painful. In silence, seek God's meaning in thy depths. Then mortal nature change to the divine. Open God's door, enter into his trance. Cast thought from thee, that nimble ape of light. Thought pretends to be light, it apes light, but it's not light. In his tremendous hush, stilling thy brain, his vast truth wake within and know and see. Cast from thee sense that veils thy spirit's sight. In the enormous emptiness of thy mind, thou shalt see the Eternal's body in the world. Know him in every voice heard by thy soul. In the world's contacts, meet his single touch, exactly what we were saying. Know him in every voice heard by thy soul. In the world's contacts, meet his single touch. Anything that touches you is Mother touching you. All things shall fold thee into his embrace. Conquer thy heart-throbs. Let thy heart beat in God. Thy nature shall be the engine of his works. Thy voice shall house the mightiness of his word. Then shalt thou harbor my force and conquer death. Another passage from Savitri. A larger,
Can you give the page number?
this is page 467. And the next I'm reading out is page 485. Our larger being sits behind cryptic walls. There are greatnesses hidden in our unseen paths that wait there are to step into life's front. We feel an aid from deep indwelling gods. One speaks within. Light comes to us from above. Our soul from its mysterious chamber acts. So beautiful. Somewhere else in Savitri he writes, unseen, unfelt, unmarked, it sees within us and acts. We don't see our soul, our psychic being, we don't mark it, we don't feel it, but it sees within us and acts. So, our soul from its mysterious chamber acts, its influence pressing on our heart and mind, pushes them to exceed their mortal selves. It seeks for good and beauty and for God. We see beyond self's walls our limitless self. We gaze through our world's glass at half-seen vases. We hunt for the truth behind apparent things. Our inner mind dwells in a larger light. So our inner mind has greater inroads to our psychic. So we earlier said that the psychic fire, and the fire is the element which is associated with vision, right? Like air with skin, space with hearing. So fire is associated with vision. So our inner mind opens to another vision. Like Sri Aurobindo's in jail, or Mirabai's just before she was going to end her life, an inner vision opened. So one speaks within, light comes to us from above. Our soul from its mysterious chamber acts, its influence pressing on our heart and mind pushes them to exceed their mortal selves. It seeks for good and beauty and for God. So that's a definite thrust of the psychic. It seeks for good and beauty and for God. When we are not connected with the psychic, we are seeking various other things. We are seeking what the ego seeks, to make other people wrong, to judge them, to feel victimized, to victimize, all that. But the psychic, it only wants this. It seeks for good and beauty and for God. We see beyond self's walls a limitless self. So the self's wall is this skin bag. When the psychic being comes forward, we see beyond self's wall a limitless self. We gaze through our world's glass at half-seen truths. We hunt for truth behind apparent things. That's what we started our talk with, no? That you have a conflict with someone, that's the apparent thing. But if you're really functioning from the psychic, then instead of playing the blame game, you will seek, if Sri Aurobindo says our outward happenings have their seed within, you will seek for that seed within that created that outward conflict. You want the truth behind apparent things. Our inner mind dwells in a larger light. Its brightness looks at us through hidden doors. Our members luminous grow, and wisdom's face appears in the doorway of the mystic ward when she enters into our house of outward sense. Then we look up and see above her sun. Sun is always a symbol of truth consciousness. So when this wisdom opens, truth stares at us in our face. A mighty life self with its inner powers supports the dwarfish modicum we call life. Such a beautiful line. A mighty life self, a very powerful self with all its inner powers supports. The dwarfish is small, modicum is something that's moderate, average, we call life. So like we were doing in today morning's class, we started and ended with Garbhatriptasan, right? So the whole feeling was, I'm this little child in an all-powerful womb of light. So that all-powerful womb of light is a mighty life self with its inner powers, which is supporting the dwarfish modicum we call life. It can graft upon our crawl two puissant wings. So this womb, this Hiranyagarbha, this golden womb that surrounds us and supports with its inner powers our littleness, our smallness, it can graft upon our crawl. We are now like an earthworm, we are crawling, we are going so slow. But this womb that supports us can graft. Graft is to plant onto us two powerful wings. So that's how this always works. We don't have to, feel helpless with our circumstances outside or inside, because there's a very beautiful line in Savitri, every line is beautiful. His knowledge overrules our nescience. That womb, the knowledge of that womb, it compensates for our ignorant groping. So every incapacity I have, that's not a statement on what I can do, because every incapacity I have is supported by the all capacity of the womb. And that's something to remember always. Krishna lifting the Govardhan, none of us have the power to lift our Govardhans, right? But he lifted it on his little finger to protect the villagers from rain. And the villagers did what, but with all their collective strength, they couldn't have lifted the Govardhan. But Krishna did lift it. So unknown to us, that invisible hand is lifting all our Govardhans. Its capacity is compensating for all our incapacity. And so we should never feel defeated. Whatever we are is not a statement on what we can be. So now the last passage from Savitri. Earth must transform herself, and this is page 486, 487. Earth must transform herself and equal heaven, or heaven descend into earth's mortal state. So last time we read that the only way Sri Aurobindo, the transformation he speaks about can happen is matter reaching out with love to the spirit and spirit responding with love. Remember, there's an interchange. Sri Aurobindo says when there's this interchange of love, that's when transformation happens. So earth must transform herself and equal heaven, or heaven descend into earth's mortal state. But for such a vast spiritual change to be, out of the mystic cavern in man's heart, the heavenly psyche, the psychic being, must put off her veil. Sri Aurobindo calls the psychic being her because it's a portion of the mother inside us. So for this transformation to happen, in the mystic, in the hidden cavern in man's heart, the psychic must come forward and put off her veil. But for such vast spiritual change to be, out of the mystic cavern in man's heart, the heavenly psyche must put off her veil and step into common nature's crowded rooms. Common nature's crowded rooms is our external being. Right now, it's like we are living in a house with two compartments and there's no door of communication. The external being is one room and there's a soundproof door between that and the psychic being. But that's what he's saying, this door must open and the psychic being must come forward and step into the external nature and influence it. So the heavenly psyche must put off her veil and step into common nature's crowded rooms and stand uncovered in that nature's front and rule its thoughts and fill the body and life. Obedient to a high command she sat. She is Savitri here. So obedient to a high command she sat. Time, life and death were passing incidents, obstructing with their transient view her sight that must break through and liberate the God imprisoned in the visionless mortal man. So Savitri is in this whole passage of trying to rescue Satyavan from death, right? And she also has her moments of despair. She also tells God that why should I struggle at all? Why should I also not just die with Satyavan? Why have you put me into this? She questions God. She experiences extreme doom and despair. But that's what it's saying. Her sight must now break through and liberate the God imprisoned in the visionless mortal man. Whenever we become unhappy, we've lost the truth vision. We can't be unhappy and have the truth vision. So, imprisoned in the visionless mortal man, the inferior nature born into ignorance still took too large a place. It veiled herself and must be pushed aside to find her soul. He's saying this even for Savitri, who was born special, who had done so much tapasya, and eventually, of course, she succeeds. But it said, the inferior nature born into ignorance still took too large a place, and that's true for all of us. The inferior nature born into ignorance still took too large a place. It veiled herself and must be pushed aside to find her soul. Now we come to a very beautiful part, surrender. Our topic was about lighting the psychic flame, and Mother says 2 things are required to light it. What is that?
Purification.
Self-purification and will for progress, aspiration. Now, surrender. Surrender, the most beautiful way to connect with your psychic. So somebody asks Mother, is not surrender the same as sacrifice? Mother answers, in our yoga there is no room for sacrifice. So in the older yogas, a way of reaching God was through sacrifice, no? So there was a lot of importance on rituals, on fasting, because there was a conditioning that if you sacrifice this for God, you will get Him. But Mother says, in our yoga, there is no room for sacrifice. But everything depends on the meaning you put on the word. In its pure sense, it means a consecrated giving. Sacrifice means a consecrated giving, a making sacred to the divine. But in the significance that it now bears, sacrifice is something that works for destruction. It carries about it an atmosphere of negation. This kind of sacrifice is not fulfillment, it is deprivation, a self-immolation. It is your possibilities that you sacrifice, the possibilities and realizations of your personality, from the most material to the highest spiritual range. Sacrifice diminishes your being. If physically you sacrifice your life, your body, you give up all your possibilities on the material plane. That's why Mother and Sri Aurobindo again and again said, don't go into fasting and rituals. Because their logic was, I am you, right? My body is you. So when you're troubling your body, you're troubling me. You have to make the body blossom, not, I mean, I know in Jainism and all, we have pictures of sages who are all skin and bone. That was their way. That was their way in the past. But Mother and Sri Aurobindo have brought a new principle into the earth, and we should avail of it. So they have trenchantly said, don't go too much into rituals or fasting or any of that. Because sacrifice in that sense diminishes your being. So in the same way, you can morally sacrifice your life. You give up the amplitude and free fulfillment of your inner existence. So one is, if the old way of sacrificing the body, you give it a lot of trouble. Or you do moral sacrifice, I won't watch TV, I won't go out, I won't party, I won't do this, I won't do that. And you dry up your vital. So Mother says, that's not my way also. I want you to be in line, in life fully, but connected to the divine. There is always in this idea of self-immolation a sense of forcing, a constriction, an imposed self-denial. This is an ideal that does not give room for the soul's deeper and larger spontaneities. By surrender, we mean not this, but a spontaneous. So she's saying surrender doesn't mean you give up your enjoyments, you give up good things in life, you stop eating, you stop drinking water, not all that. What surrender means is, by surrender we mean not this, but a spontaneous self-giving. a giving of all yourself to the divine, to the greater consciousness of which you are a part. Surrender will not diminish but increase. It will not lessen or weaken or destroy your personality. It will fortify and aggrandize it. Surrender means a free, total giving with all the delight of the giving. There is no sense of sacrifice in it. If you have the slightest feeling that you're making a sacrifice, then it is no longer surrender. For it means that you reserve yourself, or that you're trying to give with grudging or with pain and effort, and have not the joy of the gift, perhaps not even the feeling that you are giving. When you do anything with a sense of compression of your being, be sure you're doing it the wrong way. Then better you don't do it. If you're giving it with hesitation, if you're giving it with a feeling of, "Arey, will I get back something in return?" then better you don't do it. Or if you're doing it under pressure, "I hope so and so doesn't get upset if I don't do it," then in a sense it's better not to do it. Do something with your full heart, or don't do it. True surrender enlarges you. It increases your capacity. It gives you a greater measure in quality and in quantity which you could not have had by yourself. So the old idea of sacrifice and surrender shrinks you, but Mother's idea of surrender makes you blossom and become larger and larger. This new greater measure of quality and quantity is different from anything you could attain before. You enter into another world, into a wideness which you could not have entered if you did not surrender. There's a beautiful story of Udarji and the mother. We know that Udarji was the architect of not the architect was of course different, but he was in charge of the construction of Golconda. And once certain procedures had to be done, and he says, "Mother, I need money for it to get started." He was an engineer and he would do everything by hand, but even to buy materials he needed money. And Mother smiled and said, "Udar, you need money?" And she went and put a coin, a 2 rupee coin, I'm not sure of its exact denomination, but something like that, in his hand. And Udar just looking at her, "You want me to start construction on Golconda with this?" But Udar was obviously living with the mother in that state of complete surrender. He said, "Okay, if Mother has given me this, I'm going to start with this." And he said, "Thank you, Mother." He took it home and he sat with it and he said, "If you want me to do it, you'll show me how to do it." And everything just fell into place. But if at that time he had just looked at the appearance and the limited possibility in the appearance, he would have told Mother, "You're being unreasonable. What do you want me to do all that?" But look at his level of surrender. "Mother's given me this. It's correct. Mother can't be wrong. I'll start working with this." And everything just happened. Whereas we try to work too much with personal effort, too much with being a slave to our desires and our goals, and in fact we are willing to surrender Mother for that, right? I have a goal, I want to earn so many lakhs in a year. So many of us, it becomes like something that just drives us. And what will you get out of achieving so many lakhs a year? Finally, it won't really change the way you're living. It won't change anything. It's just an unnecessary pressure you've put on yourself, which is taking you away from everything else. This is one example, but many times when we have ambitions and goals, I'm not saying you shouldn't have them, but be sure they are the correct ambitions and goals. Sometimes we just create unnecessary goals, create unnecessary pressure on ourselves, and create unnecessary unhappiness in our life, right? Whereas if our goal is really Mother and surrendering to her, I mean, she had the cream of human intelligence at the ashram. So many people I've interacted with, brilliant minds. If they worked outside, they'd be millionaires. But they were people who were willing to work with the 2 rupees mother gave them. And the wealth they got was far more. What they'll be what goes with you is what you take when you die, no? All the wealth you earn, you're not going to take it when you die. So it's foolish not to invest in the only wealth that you'll take with you when you die. So in that sense, those ashramites who were willing to work with this 2 rupees mother gave them were far wealthier than all the millionaires of the world. And that's the real wealth. Consciousness is wealth, not just the physical paper money. So it is when a drop of water falls into the sea. If it still kept their separate identity, it would remain a little drop of water and nothing more. A little drop crushed by all the immensity around because it has not surrendered. But surrendering, it unites with the sea and participates in the nature and power and vastness of the whole sea. So beautiful. Now, if a drop retains its boundary, it's frightened. This storm, this wave, anything can crush it. But if it surrenders and becomes one with the sea, all the might of the sea flows through it and protects it. There is no ambiguity or vagueness in the movement. It is clear and strong and definite. If a small human mind stands in front of the divine universal mind and clings to its separateness, it will remain what it is, a small, bounded being, incapable of knowing the nature of the higher reality or even of coming in contact with it. The two continue to stand apart and are qualitatively as well as quantitatively quite different from each other. But if the little human mind surrenders, it will be merged in the divine universal mind. It will be one in quality and quantity with it, losing nothing but its own limitations and deformations. It will receive from it its vastness and luminous clearness, the small existence which will change its nature. It will put on the nature of the greater truth to which it surrenders. But if it resists and fights, if it revolts against the universal mind, then a conflict and pressure are inevitable, in which what is weak and small cannot fail to be drawn into the power of that immensity. If it does not surrender, its only other possible fate is absorption and extinction. A human being who comes into contact with the divine mind and surrenders will find his own mind begins at once to be purified of its obscurities and to share in the power and knowledge of the divine universal mind. We come to the next passage. Surrender is the decision taken to hand over the responsibility of your life to the divine. We've all heard this. Very common words of the mother, but so simple and so apt. It's the decision to hand over the responsibility of your life to the divine. So we say we've tried to surrender, but have we really done that? If there's anything important in our life, we keep worrying about it, no? We keep praying about it again and again and again. That mother, do this for me, do this for me. That's also fine, but obviously we haven't surrendered. Obviously we haven't told her that, mother, once I've given you this, you are in charge. So surrender is the decision taken to hand over the responsibility of your life to the divine. Without this decision, nothing is at all possible. If you do not surrender, the yoga is entirely out of the question. Everything else comes naturally after it, for the whole process starts with surrender. You can surrender either through knowledge or through devotion. You may have a strong intuition that the divine alone is the truth, and a luminous conviction that without the divine you cannot manage. Or you may have a spontaneous feeling that this line is the only way of being happy. A strong psychic desire to belong exclusively to the divine. I do not belong to myself, you say, and give up the responsibility of your being to the truth. Then comes self-offering. Here I am, a creature of various qualities, good and bad, dark and enlightened. I offer myself as I am to you. Take me up with all my ups and downs, conflicting impulses and tendencies. Do whatever you like with me. In course of your self-offering, you start uniting your being around what has taken the first decision, the central psychic will. So your external being cannot surrender to the mother. Sri Aurobindo mother says again and again that it's not the nature of the mind to have faith. The nature of the mind is to doubt. Faith is only in the psychic being. So this is what first takes the decision to surrender, your psychic being. In the course of your self-offering, you start unifying your being around what has taken the first decision, the central psychic will. All the jarring elements of your nature have to be harmonized. They have to be taken up one after another and unified with the central being. You may offer yourself to divine with a spontaneous movement, but it is not possible to give yourself effectively without this unification. The more you are unified, the more you are able to realize self-giving. And once the self-giving is complete, consecration follows. It's the crown of the whole process of realization, the last step of the gradation, after which there is no more trouble and everything runs smoothly. So the last passage on surrender, the most important surrender is the surrender of your character, your way of being, so it may change. If you do not surrender your very own nature, never will this nature change. It is this that is most important. So mother is saying it's not just important to surrender circumstances, desires. The most important surrender is the surrender of your character, your way of being. To constantly offer whatever is flowing through you to the mother. I've seen it, you see it, and change it. That is what lights the psychic fire, no? Self-purification and the will for progress. And the will for progress goes hand in hand with surrender, because you can't progress on your own. You have to surrender the weakness to the mother. However mighty you are on your own, very, very difficult to change human nature. Not only difficult, impossible. Therefore, in this yoga, there is such a huge reliance on the mother and her force. Because Sri Aurobindo says again and again, however great you are spiritually, this change of nature is impossible for human endeavor. It can only come when the human mind opens to the mother's light and invites her to change it. So, if you do not surrender your own nature, never will this nature change. It is this that is most important. You have certain ways of understanding, certain ways of reacting, certain ways of feeling, almost certain ways of progressing, and above all, a special way of looking at life and expecting from it certain things. Well, it is this that you must surrender. That is, if you truly want to receive the divine light and transform yourself, It is your whole way of being you must offer. Offer by opening it, making it as receptive as possible to the divine consciousness, which sees how you ought to be, may act directly and change all these movements into movements more true, more in keeping with the real truth. This is infinitely more important than surrendering what one does. What is infinitely more important than surrendering our actions? Surrender our character, surrender our emotions, our rigid ways of thinking and looking at life. Whatever the activity, it is not quite the way of doing it, but the state of consciousness in which it is done that is important. So Subhana, you earlier asked me that sometimes things go wrong, and I really feel that I didn't do anything wrong. But maybe in action we didn't do anything wrong, but did we do the action with the right consciousness? Because the universe is always responding to the consciousness with which we do things. We may do the right action, but if we do it without faith, with anxiety, with ill will, then the consequences won't be, and that only you can see. Somebody from outside will say, okay, you're doing everything perfectly. But you know honestly what was your intention behind the action. The attitude, how much of it was done out of egoism, how much of it was really done for the mother, or genuine goodwill.
If you're talking of like previously you've done something or that moment?
It could be anything. It could be, every action has a reaction, no? So it could be anything. But typically, if you're in the right consciousness in the moment, even if a past karma brings a knock, it will hit you very little because you're in the right consciousness. That consciousness will arrest the knock. But if in the moment also you're not in the right consciousness and something from the past comes, the knock throws you off. You'll stand up again, but then it's always good to examine the knock. Not accept your mind to say the knock came because that person's bad, the person disappointed me. Don't accept that. Look within for a deeper reason for the knock. Whatever the activity, it is not quite the way of doing it, but the state of consciousness in which it is done that is important. You may work, do disinterested work without any idea of personal profit, work for the joy of working, but if you are not at the same time ready to leave this work, to change the work or change the way of working, if you cling to your own way of working, your surrender is not complete. You must come to a point when everything is done, because you feel within very clearly in a more and more imperious way that it is this which must be done and in this particular way, and that you do it only because of that. You do not do it because of any habit, attachment or preference, nor even any conception, even a preference for the idea that this is the best thing to do. Else your surrender is not total. As long as you cling to something, as long as there is something in you which says this may change, that may change, but that will not change. As long as you say about anything at all that will not change, your surrender is not complete. That means you should be willing for Mother to take away anything from your life. Change any relationship, any work, anything. Of course, that's the ideal, but every step we take is work in progress. Okay? So, to sum it up, our talk was about lighting the psychic fire, and the 3 processes to light it is self-purification, and self-purification naturally involves swadhyay, studying yourself, really looking at yourself and the movements of your consciousness with discrimination. to get to the root of things. Secondly, aspiration, the will for progress. I see this seed within me that invited this blow from outside to really have the aspiration that that seed is uprooted. The will for progress. And third, surrender, a constant knowing that Mother is this eternal universal womb of light which is always carrying me, always protecting me, always taking me where I need to go. So I just have to surrender and allow myself to be carried, and never judge life by how it appears in the moment. Appearance is never the truth. Sometimes the greatest grace is given to you in the biggest blows. So when you're in the midst of conflict or trouble, instead of buckling, see that also as grace. What is Mother wanting me to address in myself? She's given me this blow because there's some pocket of unconsciousness I need to address. So how do I address it? So if we start living like that, bit by bit we start lighting the psychic fire. Yeah? So let's conclude with 3 ohms.
Can you give us the reference for this last bit, the surrender?
It's just Mother's words. I don't have a reference, but it's just the Mother. It's a compilation of the Mother's words in a volume I have. It's compiled by Georges van Rijkem, but I don't know. Vision of the Mother it's called. It's a book called The Vision of the Mother. So let's conclude with 3 ohms. Would anyone like this compilation, the hard copy?